The timeline of the most chilling abduction in recent American history is a complete fabrication built on false assumptions. Everyone assumes the nightmare began in the early hours of the 1st of February, because that is what the initial report stated. But the digital footprint recently recovered by the Federal Bureau of Investigation shatters that illusion and tells a far more sinister story. An unknown man was already standing right at the front door of the 84-year-old victim a full 3 weeks earlier on the 11th of January. The timeline we all thought we knew is completely broken. How does a predator stalk an elderly woman for 21 days without triggering a single alarm or raising a shred of suspicion? What kind of person stands in the shadows of a quiet neighborhood plotting an extraction with such cold precision? Welcome to True Crime with Liam, where we dissect the forensic realities behind the headlines. So, hit the subscribe button to join our plated investigation into a case that will make you question every security device in your home. The terrifying reality is that the events of February 1st were merely the finale of a meticulously planned operation. The public focused on the day she vanished, but the suspected predator had already marked his territory weeks prior. This was not a crime of opportunity. This was a long-term surveillance mission executed right, under the noses of the local authorities and a family who thought their loved one was safe. We have to ask ourselves, how many times did this phantom visit the property before that first digital capture on January 11th? How many nights did he watch the house, learning the routines and identifying the blind spots? The answers lie hidden in the residual data, and today we are going directly into the encrypted files to uncover the truth. Let us examine the psychological profile of a stalker who possesses the patience to wait weeks for the perfect strike. He did not rush. He calculated every variable. He knew the neighborhood patterns. He understood the technological vulnerabilities of the residents. He was a ghost operating in the physical world until a single camera caught his silhouette. The evening of January 30 first offered no warning signs of the impending catastrophe. It was a picture of absolute domestic tranquility. The 84-year-old woman shared a quiet dinner with her daughter Annie. There was no tension in the air, no strange phone calls, no vehicles lingering on the street outside the restaurant. After the meal, her son-in-law Tommaso Cioni personally drove her back to her residence in Tucson, Arizona. He ensured she was safely inside the house. He watched the door close and lock before driving away into the winter night. To anyone looking at this sequence of events, it represents the ultimate safety net, a family taking care of their matriarch, a secure home in a quiet neighborhood, and guarding that home was a Google Nest smart doorbell. That little glowing ring provides a profound psychological comfort to millions of homeowners. It implies that a digital eye is always watching and always protecting. But there was a critical and ultimately devastating flaw in this digital armor. The farting avast camera was active, but the account did not have a paid cloud storage subscription. The family likely viewed the device as a live feed monitor to check on her well-being, rather than a secure vault of historical data. They believed the presence of the camera itself was a deterrent. But predators who plan their strikes over weeks do not fear unmonitored lenses. They study them. They learn their field of view. They understand the difference between a system that actively records to a secure server and one that merely streams to a phone. To the family, that camera was a shield. To the man waiting in the dark, it was simply a mechanical obstacle with a known vulnerability. The chilling reality is that as Tommaso drove away, he left his mother-in-law completely alone in a house, watched by a compromised digital sentry. The silence of the Tucson night settled over the property. The house was locked. The alarm systems were presumed functional. But the unease lies in the knowledge that a locked door means nothing to someone who has already spent weeks mapping the perimeter. The safety of that evening was a complete illusion. The perimeter had already been breached in the mind of the attacker. The digital shield was a mirage, and as the clock ticked past midnight, the false sense of security began to rapidly unravel, leaving a vulnerable elderly woman totally exposed to a phantom who knew exactly how to dismantle her only line of defense. Consider the environment of that specific neighborhood. The quiet streets and the distance between the houses create pockets of isolation. The ambient light from the street lamps barely reaches the front porches. In this environment, a smart camera is often the only witness to nighttime activity. But when that witness has no memory due to an unpaid subscription, it becomes utterly useless after the fact. The attacker knew this. He exploited the very technology designed to keep intruders out. He turned the illusion of safety into a weapon. The deep unease comes from realizing that millions of homes operate under this exact same false pretense right now. You lock your doors and check your camera feed assuming you are protected. But if someone is patient enough to find your blind spots, the technology is nothing more than a plastic decoration on your front porch. The predator outside this Tucson home understood this perfectly, and he was simply waiting for the final light to turn off. The transition from a peaceful night to a violent crime scene occurred in absolute silence. It is approximately 2 in the morning on the 1st of February. The neighborhood is completely asleep. Suddenly, the digital heartbeat of the Google Nest camera flatlines. It does not send an alert for a motion trigger. It simply ceases to exist on the network. This was not a power outage or a random software glitch. Law enforcement would later confirm that the camera was physically disconnected. Someone approached the lens with exact knowledge of its placement and neutralized it before it could transmit a warning. Hours later, the morning sun revealed the devastating aftermath. The elderly woman was gone. She had vanished from her own home without a single neighbor hearing a struggle. The immediate search of the property yielded horrifying results. On the front porch, right near where the disabled camera hung, investigators found drops of blood, not massive pools, but distinct crimson drops staining the concrete. This physical evidence immediately shattered any hope that she had simply wandered off or experienced a medical emergency. The blood indicated violence. It indicated a struggle. It indicated an injury sustained right at the threshold of her sanctuary. And then the situation grew even more ominous. During the expanded search of the surrounding area, a deeply disturbing discovery was made. According to the Hindustan Times, women's pajamas were reportedly found discarded in the vicinity of the home. If these belong to the victim, the implications are utterly terrifying. It suggests a chaotic and forceful extraction, where the victim was removed with such speed and violence that clothing was lost. In the process, when the Pima County Sheriff deputies secured the scene, the true horror of the situation became apparent. They were standing in a home that had been surgically compromised. The attacker did not smash a window or kick down a door in a blind rage. He executed a planned breach. By cutting the camera feed, he ensured that his entry and the subsequent abduction occurred in a complete informational void. He blinded the only witness before making his move. The investigators were left staring at a severed wire and a few drops of blood. The timeline was established, but the identity of the perpetrator was cloaked in the darkness of the 2 in the morning hour. Every standard investigative protocol relies on tracking the movement of the suspect away from the scene, but this phantom left no immediate trail. The local authorities realized they were not dealing with a standard home invasion. They were dealing with an adversary who understood forensic countermeasures. The deliberate destruction of the camera feed was a massive red flag. It signaled an organized and highly capable threat. The community panicked as news spread that a vulnerable woman had been snatched from her home, leaving only silence behind. How does someone carry out an abduction of this magnitude without leaving a chaotic scene? The precision of the strike is what makes it so terrifying. The absence of massive property damage points to a controlled environment where the attacker maintained absolute dominance over the situation. The blood on the porch tells a story of brief resistance before total control was established. The 5 discarded pajamas reportedly found nearby paint a picture of a desperate struggle in the cold night air. The fact that the attacker took the time to disable the camera rather than simply masking his face proves a level of sophistication rarely seen in random attacks. He wanted to ensure there was no digital record of his methodology, no record of his vehicle, no record of his physical build or the exact time of his departure. He engineered a digital blackout to cover his tracks. The local police were effectively blindfolded, standing at the edge of a rapidly cooling trail. They needed a miracle to see into the darkness of that night. They needed to find a way to look back in time and view the moments right before the feed was severed. They needed technology to betray the man who thought he had defeated it. The miracle came from an unprecedented collaboration between federal agents and the private sector. The Pima County authorities were blind, but the Federal Bureau of Investigation Cyber Division possesses tools that go far beyond standard police work. They knew the camera was unpaid and the feed was dead. But big tech infrastructure is incredibly complex. The federal agents issued subpoenas to Google to probe the back-end servers. They were hunting for residual data. They were looking for the digital ghost of the final seconds before the physical disconnection. The process is akin to resurrecting a deleted file from a damaged hard drive. It requires immense technical skill and legal authority. On the 10th of February, the results of this digital excavation were finally released to the public, and the image recovered is pure nightmare fuel. The FBI successfully pulled a corrupted video file from the Google servers. The footage shows the exact moment at 2 in the morning before the camera was destroyed. Out of the darkness emerges a male suspect. He is estimated to be between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall. He is not a desperate burglar looking for quick cash. He is dressed for a tactical assault. He is wearing a heavy coat to obscure his physical build. A mask completely hides his facial features. He is wearing 2 layers of gloves, ensuring that absolutely no fingerprints or touch DNA will be left on any surface he interacts with. Strapped across his chest is a weapon holster, clearly indicating he is armed and prepared for lethal confrontation. On his back is a 25-liter black Ozark Trail backpack. The sheer volume of this backpack suggests he brought tools for the extraction or intended to remove specific items from the home. This image completely changes the trajectory of the entire case. This is not a random crime of opportunity. This is a militarized individual executing a highly planned operation against an 84-year-old woman. The disproportionate level of force and preparation is staggering. Why does a heavily armed and masked man need a tactical loadout to abduct a senior citizen? What is inside that 25-liter backpack? Are there restraints? Are there specialized tools for defeating internal locks? Do you think this suspect is a hired professional carrying out a targeted hit, or someone from the inner circle of the victim operating behind a tactical disguise? So let me know your theories in the comments section right now. The public release of this image sent shockwaves through the country. It confirmed the worst fears of the investigators. The man on the porch was a predator who left nothing to chance. The double-layered gloves show a forensic awareness that elevates him above a common criminal. The chest holster shows a willingness to kill anyone who intercepts him. The mask and heavy clothing show a deliberate strategy to defeat facial recognition and physical profiling. He built a persona of pure anonymity. The recovered footage is brief, but it is incredibly dense with terrifying details. It shows his posture. It shows his deliberate movements. He does not rush toward the lens. He approaches it with the calm demeanor of someone who has rehearsed this exact movement 100 times. The fact that Google servers held onto this residual data, despite the lack of a paid subscription, is a massive technological revelation. It means that the devices on our homes are constantly capturing and transmitting fragments of data, even when we think they are dormant. The attacker thought he had severed the connection in time. He believed he had operated entirely in the blind spot. But he made a critical miscalculation regarding the latency of cloud computing. A fraction of a second of footage escaped down the wire before the physical break occurred. That tiny fragment of data traveled across the country to a server farm where it sat in a digital purgatory until federal agents dragged it back into the light. That single frame of video is the only reason the world knows what the monster looks like. But a picture is not a name, and the phantom is still out there. The identification of the tactical suspect ratcheted the pressure on the local authorities to an unbearable level. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos found himself standing in the center of a massive media firestorm. The intense national scrutiny was driven by the high-profile nature of the family of the victim. When the mother of a famous television host vanishes, the resources and the cameras descend on the local jurisdiction immediately. The public demands answers, and the police had very few to give. In the vacuum of solid leads, the suspicion inevitably turned toward those closest to the victim. It is a harsh reality of criminal investigations that the family is always looked at first. Savannah Guthrie, along with Cameron and Annie and Tommaso Cioni, were subjected to intense law enforcement scrutiny. They faced grueling interviews and the immense psychological pressure of polygraph examinations. The authorities had to eliminate the possibility of an inside job before they could fully commit to the theory of a stranger abduction. The family cooperated fully. They sat for the polygraphs and answered every intrusive question. The results were definitive. The entire family passed the tests, and they were officially cleared of any suspicion or involvement by the investigating agencies. Desperate for a day, Breakthrough, the cleared family, pooled their resources and announced a massive $1 million reward for information leading to her safe return. $1 million is a life-changing sum of money, designed to shatter loyalties and force accomplices to turn on each other. The investigative teams expanded their grid searches, hoping the massive reward would shake loose a witness. Then a critical piece of physical evidence was finally discovered. 2 miles away from the residence, search teams found a discarded glove. It was not just any glove. It visually matched the distinct type worn by the heavily armed suspect in the recovered Google server video. This was the break the crime lab had been praying for. The attacker may have worn double gloves to prevent leaving fingerprints at the house, but he made a crucial error in his exfiltration route by discarding the outer layer. Forensic technicians carefully swabbed the interior of the material, hoping to find skin cells or sweat left behind by the wearer. The laboratory successfully extracted biological material. It was a mixed male DNA sample. This means the genetic material of more than one individual was present, but they isolated a distinct male profile that did not belong to anyone in the family or the investigative team. The authorities immediately rushed this profile into the combined DNA index system, operated by the FBI. They waited for the database to return a name. They waited for the screen to blink with a mugshot of a known offender. But the result was a devastating blow to the momentum of the case. The system returned 0 matches. There was no hit in CODIS. The man in the tactical gear, the phantom who stalked the house for weeks, does not exist in the federal criminal database. He is a ghost. The lack of a database match means he has never been arrested for a felony that required a DNA swab. It means he has operated under the radar of the justice system for his entire life, or he is a foreign national with no criminal footprint in the United States. The biological evidence, which is usually the silver bullet in modern investigations, became just another dead end. The frustration within the Pima County Sheriff Department was palpable. They had a picture of the suspect. They had his genetic code. They had the weapon type and the backpack brand. They had $1 million bounty on his head. Yet they were no closer to finding the 84-year-old woman than they were on the morning she vanished. The investigation seemed completely stalled. The traditional methods of canvassing and forensic analysis were yielding 0 actionable intelligence. Sheriff Nanos faced daily press briefings, where he had to admit that the highly sophisticated attacker had successfully outmaneuvered the combined efforts of local and federal law enforcement. The focus had to shift from the physical evidence left behind to the digital environment surrounding the crime scene. If the suspect was meticulous enough to avoid CODIS and defeat the primary camera, he might have made a mistake on the periphery. The detectives began pulling every single frame of neighborhood surveillance video from a 5-mile radius. They were looking for a needle in a digital haystack. They needed to find out how a man carrying a heavy backpack and a weapon moved through a quiet residential area at 2 in the morning without being seen by anyone. The answer to that question would soon emerge from the shadows of a neighboring security feed, and it would completely rewrite the narrative of the abduction once again. The silence stretching past those initial 72 hours began to suffocate the investigation, creating an atmosphere of unbearable psychological torment. When a high-value target is taken, the established behavioral pattern dictates that the captors will swiftly establish communication to leverage their asset. Yet the days bled into weeks, and the anticipated ransom demand never materialized through official channels. Instead, a bizarre and highly questionable development emerged from the digital shadows, complicating an already convoluted narrative. Allegedly, a digital correspondence was transmitted not to the authorities handling the crisis, but directly to the entertainment news outlet, TMZ. According to reporting by Katie Couric Media and CNN, this anonymous electronic mail contained an astronomical extortion demand. The sender required a transfer of $6 million to be routed exclusively through decentralized cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin. This unconventional approach to demanding capital immediately triggered intense skepticism among federal profilers and cybersecurity experts analyzing the communication. Extortionists typically provide something tangible to validate their claims and ensure compliance from the terrified recipients. The absolute most critical element in any ransom negotiation is the undeniable verification that the captive is currently breathing and in the physical custody of the individual making the demands. However, this alleged $6 million ultimatum arrived with absolutely 0 accompanying media. There was no recent photograph holding a current newspaper. There was no audio recording of a terrified voice pleading for compliance. There was a complete and utter absence of any verifiable proof of life. This glaring omission transformed the situation from a straightforward kidnapping for ransom into a terrifying guessing game. The authorities had to evaluate whether this Digital demand was a legitimate correspondence from the tactical intruder or simply the work of a highly opportunistic scammer, attempting to capitalize on a national tragedy. The decentralized nature of Bitcoin makes tracking the intended recipient incredibly difficult, which is why malicious actors prefer it. But it also means anyone with an internet connection anywhere on the globe could have drafted that message. If the email was a cruel hoax, it meant the true perpetrators were still operating in total silence, maintaining a terrifying level of operational security. But if the demand was authentic, it raised horrifying questions about the condition of the captive. Why would the captors demand a fortune, but refuse to prove they could deliver the asset alive? The agonizing ambiguity acts as a psychological weapon against the loved ones waiting for the phone to ring. The investigators were forced to divide their precious resources, dedicating cyber units to trace the origin of a potentially fraudulent cryptocurrency demand, while the physical search teams continued to scour the arid landscapes of southern Arizona. The sheer volume of misinformation that surrounds a heavily publicized crisis creates a dense fog that obscures the actual evidence. Every alleged tip and every anonymous message must be meticulously verified, draining time that the captive simply does not have. The frustrating lack of authentic communication suggested an adversary who was either incredibly disciplined or someone who had made a catastrophic error and was now scrambling to contain the fallout. The psychological weight of this specific type of ambiguous loss is utterly devastating. When an individual vanishes without a trace, the human mind struggles to process the absence because there is no closure to ground. The grieving process. Federal hostage negotiators recognize that a silent captor is often the most dangerous type of adversary. The refusal to engage in standard negotiation tactics indicates a disturbing level of control. Furthermore, the specific choice to allegedly contact a celebrity gossip publication demonstrates an understanding of how modern media consumption works, recognizing that a sensational headline will generate immediate mass hysteria. This tactic effectively weaponizes public outrage, using the relentless media cycle to amplify the pressure exponentially. The digital footprint of the cryptocurrency demand became a primary battleground for cyber forensics experts who attempted to unravel the complex routing protocols to identify the geographic origin of the transmission. Every router ping and server hop was scrutinized to determine if the message originated locally or was masked behind a labyrinth of international proxies. The complexity of this digital chase highlights the evolving nature of modern criminal enterprises, where the extortion phase is decoupled from the physical act of violence. This narrative complication forces us to question the underlying motive of the entire operation. Share this video right now. If you want to warn your community about the insidious nature of digital opportunists who prey on vulnerable situations, the lack of a clear motive and the absence of verifiable communication left the federal agents grasping at phantoms, while the real breakthrough was waiting silently in the digital archives of a completely different residential surveillance system, located just a short distance down the street. The investigative pivot away from the primary residence yielded the most critical revelation of the entire timeline. While the immediate crime scene had been digitally blinded by the severed wire, law enforcement relentlessly canvassed the wider neighborhood grid, hoping to catch a peripheral mistake. Their exhaustive search eventually centered on a neighboring property equipped with an active ring security system. This device was not pointed directly at the compromised house, but its wide angle lens captured a crucial segment of the access road leading out of the subdivision. When analysts meticulously reviewed the footage from that dark winter morning, they discovered a massive anomaly that completely altered the trajectory of the manhunt. According to NBC News, the external video log recorded a mysterious vehicle navigating the quiet residential streets at exactly 2:30 in the morning on the 1st of February. This timestamp is the linchpin that shatters all previous assumptions. It places a moving transport vehicle in the immediate vicinity, mere minutes after the tactical operative disabled the primary monitoring device. The presence of this machine instantly eradicates the theory of a lone wolf offender operating on foot. A solitary attacker carrying a heavy payload would never risk walking miles through suburban streets, exposing himself to unpredictable patrols or insomniac neighbors. 2:30 timestamp confirms the existence of a highly coordinated mechanized extraction plan, involving at least one other conspirator acting as the designated driver. But the true horror of this discovery only materializes when you cross-reference this new data point with the initial scouting. footage. Remember the chilling image of the unidentified individual loitering on the front porch exactly 3 weeks earlier. During that initial reconnaissance phase, he was completely unburdened. He carried no equipment and wore no tactical gear. He was essentially mapping the operational theater and testing the response times. When we connect that unburdened scouting mission to the heavily armed breach and the waiting getaway, transport, the sinister reality crystallizes with terrifying clarity. This was an orchestrated precision strike, orchestrated by a multi-person syndicate. The individual who approached the lens with the cutting tool was merely the entry team, while the driver waited safely in the shadows, ready to facilitate an immediate vanishing act. They engineered a specific window of opportunity, isolating a vulnerable target, neutralizing the only electronic witness, and executing a seamless exfiltration before the authorities even knew a crime had occurred. The synchronization required to pull off this maneuver speaks to a terrifying level of rehearsal and logistical support. They knew the exact layout of the neighborhood and clearly mapped the blind spots between the scattered streetlights to position their transport perfectly. The vehicle acts as a mobile fortress, providing immediate concealment and the ability to cover vast distances rapidly, effectively expanding the search radius from a few local miles to the entirety of the state and beyond within hours. This revelation profoundly deepens the mystery surrounding the ultimate objective, a coordinated team employing military-style tactics, and securing a dedicated transport vehicle does not deploy such extensive resources without a significant anticipated return on investment. The execution was flawless, but the target remains perplexing. The logistical expenditure required to pull this off seems vastly disproportionate to the profile of a highly vulnerable local senior citizen. This disconnect between the extreme sophistication of the tactical breach and the vulnerability of the captive suggests that the true motive is buried beneath layers of deception we have yet to uncover. Every new piece of forensic evidence only serves to magnify the sheer scale of the conspiracy. The coordinated nature of the strike means there is a hidden network of communication, a secured staging area, and a meticulously prepared holding facility designed to hide a human being from the most intensive federal manhunt in recent history. The terrifying implication is that the syndicate responsible for this flawlessly executed nightmare might not just be a group of opportunistic criminals, but a highly specialized entity capable of operating invisibly within our communities. The vehicle captured at 2:30 in the morning is the ghost ship that carried the victim away from her life, and identifying its make and model remains the absolute highest priority for the ongoing federal task force. The discovery of this transport link completely redefined the parameters of the pursuit, proving that the answers will not be found lingering in the local desert, but are likely speeding down an interstate highway constantly moving to avoid the tightening dragnet. Please hit the like button on this video if you appreciate how we dissect these intricate forensic timelines to uncover the hidden truths behind the headlines. This massive breakthrough finally illuminated the mechanics of the disappearance, but the crushing reality of the present situation offers very little comfort to those desperately waiting for answers. The passage of time is the most relentless enemy in any abduction scenario, and the current reality of this investigation is a masterclass in sustained agony. We are now well past the 30-day mark, and the terrifying truth is that the elderly victim remains completely unaccounted for. Despite the unprecedented federal intervention, the recovery of the deleted server data, and the identification of the getaway time frame, the perpetrators have successfully maintained their cloak of invisibility. The massive multi-agency task force continues to grind forward, analyzing every shred of digital debris and chasing down every lead, but the physical trail has gone completely cold. The family, along with the lead investigators, exist in a state of suspended animation, caught between the desperate hope for a safe return and the crushing weight of the unknown. The most frustrating aspect of this current stalemate is the absolute failure of massive public pressure to crack the conspiracy. Despite the relentless national media coverage broadcasting the crisis, not a single credible informant has emerged from the criminal underworld. The intense spotlight is usually more than enough to force a sudden betrayal. It is designed to create intense paranoia within any syndicate, turning anxious accomplices against each other in a desperate race to secure federal immunity. The fact that no one has stepped out of the shadows to negotiate suggests a terrifying internal discipline. This level of loyalty or terror is rarely seen outside of highly organized criminal syndicates or deeply fanatical groups. The prevailing silence forces us to confront the most chilling unanswered question of this entire saga. Where exactly do you hide a highly recognizable woman during the most publicized manhunt in the nation without leaving a single verifiable footprint? Operating a clandestine holding facility requires constant logistical support. It requires securing untraceable medical supplies, maintaining a secure perimeter, and managing the daily necessities of a fragile captive without ever drawing the attention of neighbors or law enforcement. Every interaction is a potential point of failure, yet this group has managed to operate flawlessly for weeks. They have evaded thermal imaging, aerial surveillance, and the vast network of automated license plate readers that blanket our modern highway systems. The sheer logistical perfection of their continued evasion is almost as terrifying as the initial breach itself. It suggests a network equipped with safe houses, encrypted communication channels, and a deep understanding of counter-surveillance techniques. The investigators are no longer just looking for a man with a backpack. They are hunting a sophisticated apparatus designed to swallow people whole. As the days continue to pass, the focus of the search must inevitably shift toward long-term survival strategies and the grim task of preparing for an extended siege. The agonizing reality is that the brilliant forensic work that resurrected the deleted footage and identified the timeline anomalies has not yet translated into a physical rescue. The digital ghosts have been exposed, but the living, breathing human beings responsible for this atrocity are still operating out of reach. The local authorities and federal agents remain completely dedicated to the pursuit, but they are fighting an adversary who has effectively weaponized silence and time. The community remains on edge, haunted by the knowledge that such a capable and ruthless entity could strike so effectively within their ostensibly safe borders. The lack of resolution leaves a permanent scar on the collective psyche, a lingering dread that the shadows are far deeper and more dangerous than we ever dared to imagine. The wait continues, and the desperate search for a single, verifiable clue remains the absolute highest priority for everyone involved in this unprecedented and heartbreaking case. The unresolved nature of this crisis forces law enforcement to constantly reevaluate their operational models. They must acknowledge that the traditional methods of tracking fugitives are failing against this new breed of technologically aware predators. The silence is deafening, and the clock never stops ticking. What this case teaches us about the illusion of privacy in the smart home era is profoundly unsettling and demands a rigorous analytical reassessment of our personal security frameworks. The tangible value extracted from this investigation reveals a terrifying vulnerability in consumer-grade Internet of Things devices. We install these automated sentries, believing they provide an impenetrable perimeter of deterrence. However, the stark reality, demonstrated by this targeted extraction, is that disconnected and unmonitored hardware merely provides a false sense of security. The technological apparatus is fundamentally incapable of neutralizing a determined physical threat who understands the infrastructure. This incident proves that relying solely on local device presence without robust, secure cloud retention renders the system entirely useless against an adversary equipped with basic cutting tools. Simultaneously, this scenario forces us to confront a deeply problematic dichotomy regarding digital data retention and corporate oversight. The only reason investigators secured a visual profile of the tactical intruder was because the back-end infrastructure of a massive technology corporation retained fragments of user data long after the local connection was violently severed. This reality establishes a chilling paradox for the modern citizen. The very mechanisms that systematically erode our daily privacy by quietly archiving our digital footprints on remote servers become the critical lifelines required by the justice system to prosecute complex atrocities. We are caught in a precarious balance between sacrificing our fundamental right to absolute privacy and empowering law enforcement, with the retrospective omniscience necessary to combat highly organized syndicates. The architecture designed for consumer convenience has inadvertently transformed into a vast, unregulated forensic archive, where our safety is ultimately contingent upon the latent data policies of private tech monopolies, rather than the immediate protection of local law enforcement agencies. This systemic failure highlights an urgent need for comprehensive legislative reform immediately. The haunting, The reality of this unresolved abduction leaves us staring into the terrifying void created by modern organized crime. We have dissected a timeline where physical barriers were effortlessly bypassed and digital safety nets were weaponized against the victim. The agonizing wait for answers continues as a highly capable syndicate remains completely hidden from the largest investigative apparatus on the planet. This case shatters our complacency and forces us to acknowledge that true security requires far more than just a glowing ring on a front porch. If a sophisticated network can manipulate smart home infrastructure to execute a flawless vanishing act, we must seriously question the integrity of every other digital footprint we leave behind. The technology we trust implicitly can easily become the instrument of our own destruction. In our next investigation, we will explore a terrifying scenario where the exact opposite occurs. We will break down a chilling case where seemingly innocuous global positioning system data was actively manipulated to construct the perfect alibi for a brutal killer. You absolutely do not want to miss that forensic breakdown, so make sure you hit subscribe and turn on all notifications right now. I am Liam, and I will see you in the next investigation.